Thanks for coming out tonight, folks. Even the people who are being paid to be here are the back there.
We'll never forgive you for saying that.
Maybe we can find something to entertain you. So if you don't know who I am, I'm Ben Mosley, new chair of the AES UK, work mainly at Leeds, Beckett University. I've also found out today it's One Planet Week at your university.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, there's all sorts of stuff going on around the campus, so it kind of fits in reasonably well.
Of course, we did this on purpose.
Yeah, all planned. So that's the kind of abstract that I threw out there. Why have I dragged you here tonight? Talk about the crazy world where some people in hard hats in a big shed a long way away are setting fire to ancient remains of long lost creatures in order that you can make a brew, listen to your favourite album, and exploring the audience's part in that and how education and awareness can help prevent us making a spectacular mess of a spectacular planet. That's the plan. I haven't got any pictures of people in hard hats, so I have to apologise in advance. I'm assuming the fact that you're here and have probably read that, I'm going to assume I'm preaching to the converted in terms of sustainability. You know what it is, you know about the agenda and climate change, and you've probably read The Guardian a few times. And you kind of roughly know what we're talking about. If you don't know what we're talking about, Stephen Hawking will tell you in no uncertain terms that we're facing awesome environmental challenges: climate change, food production, overpopulation, decimation of species, disease, acidification of the oceans, and he says that we don't yet have the power to escape this planet, but we very much have the power to destroy it, which is an interesting thing to bear in mind. So I'm going to go a little bit back to school for the first bit, because kind of from chatting to my students, and running through some of these ideas, that people don't really know what happens when you plug things in. Nobody really thinks about where's that energy coming from, what are you plugging into, and how is that being generated. So I'm sure everybody's got a four-way like this with lots of crazy connectors in it, but essentially you're plugging into the national grid, a connection of huge cables strung up hundreds of feet above us, which all feed back to dark, mysterious places like this, which we call power stations. So not the most attractive of buildings, and these are the big sheds that I'm talking about in my abstract. There's mysterious things happening in those big sheds. Nobody really knows apart from the people who live in the big sheds themselves. So a lot of these big sheds, power stations, burn coal, and coal has traditionally been one of the biggest what we call fossil fuels. It's dirty, it's smoky, it produces lots of CO2 and emissions, but we're still quite keen on setting fire to it. And coal is effectively millions and millions of years old forest and swamp that's slowly decayed, been squeezed by rocks and dirt over millions of years into a hardened crust, and we set fire to that. We dig it out of the ground and we burn it in order to make electricity. Obviously, I'm sure you are, it's a finite resource. You can't just go digging all the coal out, it's going to run out at some point. So, I told you it was back to school. We've got kind of GCSE style science diagrams of how power stations work. So this is a coal-fired power station. We shove some coal into a furnace, we set fire to it, and we use that to boil some water in order to turn a steam turbine that turns a generator that makes some power. It's a massive kettle, essentially. It's a massive kettle in order to drive some sort of turbine. Not very sophisticated, not particularly efficient, but that's how a huge amount of the world's energy is derived. And it's Victorian engineering. I found these lovely old pictures of steam turbines from the early 1900s, and it's Victorian stuff. It's basically, steam, copper pipes, turbines, valves, all that sort of stuff. And we're still using that sort of technology today. It still exists, not far from here. this is a really nice picture of Greenwich Power Station. And this is the turbine hall from Bankside Power Station in London. Anybody know what that's become now?
Flats?
No, it's the Tate Modern.
Oh yeah.
It's the turbine hall at Tate Modern.
Oh god.
Hence why it's called turbine hall, because it was full of steam
Turbines.
turbines back in the day. And this is a picture of a turbine at Drax Power Station, which is about 20 miles that way, biggest one in Yorkshire. Do we notice the similarities across all this sort of stuff? So basically our power generation hasn't changed in 100 years, essentially. We're still doing the same thing. And the world over, this is what power stations look like. We set fire to something in order to boil some water, in order to create some steam. And that's kind of the way it works, really. So, being a bit of an idiot and into kind of experiential learning, I decided to make my own power station. It's involved a lot of fun DIY. Don't know how we're doing volume wise, but
You cut your thumb off, is it?
yeah, there was a fair amount of swearing. So this is me in my kitchen hacking up stuff. I made myself promise that I could only use stuff that's lying around the house. So I found some old bits of sort of acrylic sheet, which I hacked up to make basically a turbine. So I was very pleased with myself at this point, having great kind of Blue Peter style fun. Oh, there's me in my shed. Copper tube. Sorry, that was a very loud blowtorch. That was me with a blowtorch, doing a bit of plumbing. So the intention was to make a power station. So I've got here some gas. We'll talk about gas in a minute. I was kind of hoping to be burning some coal or wood, but we started off with gas just to see whether it would work. So here's my old water bottle, repurposed with some copper pipe into my kind of water wheel style turbine, to a flywheel, driving a little electric motor. And as you can see, got some steam, but it isn't working. So this is either a kind of a problem with my engineering, which I think is probably part of it, and the fact I only gave myself a Saturday afternoon to do this, and I've got a life and had to move on to other things. And also the fact that just burning fuel to create steam is really inefficient, and it's actually really difficult to get enough energy out of it, even to turn that little wheel. What I was trying to do was to was to drive a little sound system that I built, a couple of random bits and bobs that I got sitting around. So create some entertainment for me outside. So I ended up with this. I have to apologise for the band. It was all I could get at short notice. He was quite a willing participant. But as you can see, he's not getting a lot of support from the PA because I couldn't quite get it working. And I had several goes at this. This is repurposed, more gas, more battered water bottles. I made a kind of wind turbine style thing, but even that wouldn't work. So loads of steam, but nothing happening. Even if you flick it, nothing going on. It's actually a really inefficient way of doing things. Complete waste of my Saturday afternoon. I secretly quite enjoyed it, even though it was a complete failure. But it kind of proved the point that I was sort of trying to make, that it's not very efficient boiling water to generate steam to drive turbines. And why are we still doing it? It's, you know, 100 years since its technology came along. So there are other things we can burn, mostly formerly live stuff. So you might have heard of oil-fired power stations and gas-fired. Oil and gas are the same thing. They're living creatures that died several millions of years ago, trapped under layers and layers of rock. We dig it out, we set fire to it, we turn it into petrol, we turn it into jet fuel, we do all sorts of things with it, but essentially it's a finite resource. A gas-fired power station looks pretty similar. Turbine, boiling water, condensers, steam turbines, all that sort of stuff. It's the same process, and it's the same with oil. So what alternatives have we got? It's obviously nuclear. I have very mixed feelings on nuclear power. It's a very, in some ways, it's incredibly green and renewable. In some ways, it's incredibly dangerous, and we have a serious problem in terms of what we do with the waste from that. Where do we put waste nuclear products? So, hence the two very conflicting views, and you will get that throughout the world. Lots of people think nuclear is great, but things like Fukushima disasters can put a whole country off nuclear power. Not many people know how a nuclear power station works, so again, I've been off finding GCSE science images. It's the same thing. Essentially, instead of setting fire to something, we're using a very dangerous lump of uranium that's just about on the edge of turning itself into a nuclear bomb, that's just sat there generating loads of heat. And what we do with that heat, we boil some water to create some steam, to drive some turbines. And it's exactly the same process, kind of from that side, except we've got an incredibly unstable lump of nuclear material on the verge of meltdown sat at this end, hence the fact it's in a big containment building. So it's not really clever thinking, it's just finding another way to boil some water. So yeah, we kind of seem obsessed with boiling water. Biomass. Biomass sounds great, doesn't it? It's bio stuff. Obviously sounds pretty good. So when you hear about biomass power stations, again, it's the same thing. We take some stuff, we stick it in a big storage thing, we stick it in a flame, we set fire to it, and would you believe it, we're boiling some water to drive a steam turbine. This one actually, I quite like this because it's got that on it as well, where you take some of that heat and you use that to provide hot water and heating for the local area. They do that a lot in Scandinavia, not at all in the UK, which is a real shame because you're generating all this heat. You know, what are you going to do with it? Why just letting it escape? So biomass sounds like a really good idea until you kind of find out what biomass actually is and what it potentially could be. So yeah, I'm not entirely keen on my local power station burning human sewage in order to heat it. I guess it's got to go somewhere, but it's a wide range of things that could potentially become biomass, from the stuff that you throw away in your black bin bag, all the way through to animal and human waste that could be burnt. So again, you could argue, well, it's waste, it's got to go somewhere. Maybe that's a good use of it, maybe not, but it's often quite eye-opening to realise what biomass actually is. So here we've got a lot of different power stations. We've got biomass, we've got coal, and we've got nuclear, and they all do the same thing. It's all a quest to generate some heat, to boil some water, to power a steam turbine, which it's kind of interesting, really, that we've not got beyond that. You know, my thought is there must be a better way. There must be you know, a better way of doing it than just reverting back to these old Victorian ideas of let's create steam and spin turbines. They're essentially massive steam engines, which you'd have thought would have progressed a little bit more beyond that. Obviously, there are alternatives. I love seeing these things in the countryside. A lot of people don't like them being in their backyard, but I don't think we have any option, really. At the end of the day, it's renewable, it's green, it's clean, and fantastic resource. The UK is putting in loads of solar farms. Again, really great clean energy. There is also the argument that the solar panels take a lot of energy to make them. Most of them just about pay back through their lifetime, but the sun is a renewable source. We should make a hell of a lot more use of it. This is the breakdown of UK energy generation over the past 10 years, which is kind of interesting. What's really pleasing to see is the fact that we've scaled back on coal. So that brown lump on top has slowly narrowed to the point where we're burning actually very little coal. That's been a deliberate decision on the part of the government over the last 10 years, partly in kind of response to the Paris Agreement, certainly more recently, but they've definitely tried to back off on coal. The wind power has slowly expanded. Nuclear is quite interesting in that it stays the same all the way through. So nuclear is kind of our baseline. That's what gives the country its baseline power. There's a kind of a complexity here where the sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow, so you need something which is there all the time that's capable of providing the baseline energy for a country. So it's very difficult to move completely away from these older methods because they are reliable in terms of producing energy. Yeah, it's nice to see wind and solar gaining a bit of traction. This is kind of breaking it down to quarters, and you can actually see the way that winter and summer change in terms of the way that the country has to respond to provide more and more energy. So coal on the top there goes up and down to provide the extra required during the winter. You'll notice that nuclear, the pink one, is pretty solid because it's kind of tricky to turn a nuclear reactor on and off. So it kind of has to stay on. Whereas a coal reactor, you just ring up the people down the road at Drax and they fire up another turbine and stick more coal on the fire, and off we go. This is a map of the energy usage in the UK over the last 40 years, pretty much 40 to 50 years. And you can see that the major change here is the decline in industry and the increase in transport. We are spending more of our energy just getting people and goods from one place to another. Big industry, heavy industry has completely died off since the 1970s to the point that it's now, as of 1990-ish, it's less than household use. And household use has stayed pretty steady. I would have expected that to increase, but the energy we use at home is pretty steady. And actually it's been falling in recent years because of low energy light bulbs, low usage home appliances and that sort of thing. So we're starting to see a decrease in that. But most of our energy goes on transport. So whenever you buy stuff from Amazon, you're contributing towards that. So just getting people and things to where they need to be is the biggest user of energy, far bigger than all of our industries put together, which is kind of a little bit scary, really.
What comes under other?
It's a good question. I don't know. I don't know. What would be home transport and industry? Military, probably. Installations, that sort of thing. But I'm not 100% sure. It's been fairly constant over the last 20 years, so probably nothing to worry about.
So can I ask a question just related to that? So you talked about kind of the transport, for example, involved in deliveries of Amazon. So would the use of drones that is planned for deliveries help that? Would that actually be better?
In theory, yeah. You're not burning fuel at the end of the day. But yes, you've got to generate the electricity to power those drones.
Yeah.
And where has the electricity come to charge them? If that's come from a renewable source, then great. Yeah. Anything that can take vehicles off the road is a good thing, as far as I'm concerned. So that's the wider state of play and a little bit of a GCSE science lesson in how power stations work. Hopefully that's kind of been interesting. And my failed attempts to make a power station, hopefully quite amusing. We'll return to that later. So just coming down a little bit in terms of narrowing things down to what we do in terms of creative industries, music, audio, broadcasting. There's loads of good stuff happening. Loads of really good stuff. Anybody who works in TV should be aware of Albert. Albert's been around for about 10 years now. Anybody aware of Albert or not aware at all? A little bit. You've been working kind of out professionally, and might have had a little bit to do with Albert. So Albert's basically a certification system for green TV. The BBC work under this, so do ITV and Channel 4. As you can see, it's kind of guidance, training, events. They have links with the green energy groups. So yeah, the BBC have worked very closely with this. It came out of the BAFTA organisation. So it's basically a lot of stuff is run under this kind of Albert banner. You can sign up to their website. You can use their carbon calculator. You can work out how much your film or TV program or radio program is going to cost to make in terms of carbon contributions, and all sorts of tick lists and guides in terms of how to do that. And you can get your TV production certified, and it will appear on their website as a whole list of certified TV programs, which is really cool. They're working with all sorts of people. I would argue that my own establishment and this establishment probably should be on that list, given that we've got theatre, film and TV in here, and Leeds Beckett has the Northern Film School. But maybe we can nudge our colleagues to get involved in this. But you can see all the big broadcasters are involved in this. Lots of universities who have film and TV schools as well. So yeah, it's getting a lot of traction. A lot of people are aware of it. And if you end up going out and working for people like the BBC, ITV, Channel 4, Sky, you will be working under the Albert certification scheme, because the BBC are keen to get as many programmes certified as possible. So it's something you should be aware of if you want to go out and work in this sort of industry, that these structures and these schemes are out there and they exist. So I'll have a quick spin through this, just pick out the key issues. We've got sustainable transport plan, choose local accommodation, track your energy usage, use efficient generators, provide clear recycling points, cut your travel to a minimum, low carbon vehicles, make sure your vehicles are full, and use Albert to kind of make sure that you cut carbon emissions to a minimum. So that's the sort of guidance that they're making. Nothing really complicated, really. Just thinking about things and doing things the right way. Travel is a big thing, and obviously when you're out on site, using generators for location recording is a big thing as well. All the big broadcasters are on board with this. So ITV have ITV Responsibility section. They even have their own website, itvresponsibility.com. So they're very much on board. So most of the big companies are doing this through their corporate responsibility banner. The idea, which I completely agree with, is that these big companies are exploiting people, materials and the planet in order to make money. In that respect, they have a responsibility to look after those three things as they're exploiting them in order to make loads of money. So many of the big companies take this seriously. Sky's is superb actually. It's got a really good corporate responsibility. Pages and pages of really good stuff. They give back a lot. Channel 4, not quite so good, but it is there, it is present. So BBC have been running this The Difference thing, which I think was a new thing for Salford recently. Again, talking about energy efficiency, reducing travel, working with suppliers to improve the products and services that they procure, embedding sustainability in the TV production process, and raising awareness as well. So talking about things, embedding things, make sure it's just part of your daily operation, so it becomes habit, becomes just the way you do things. And that's the best way to affect change, really, is to make it part of your everyday professional practice. This is ITV. Again, managing energy use, minimise waste, minimise emissions, promote recycling, work with suppliers, and measure and monitor environmental data. And Sky, highlighting the same things: emissions, energy efficiency, renewables, increasing your fleet efficiency, reducing CO2 emissions, and zero waste to landfill at their main offices, which is quite an ambitious thing to aim for. So yeah, all the broadcasters are on board. Lots of the smaller companies are also getting involved in this. Albert gives you a really nice kind of overarching guidance, way of doing things. And again, if you're going to be ending up in that industry, you need to be aware of this, because you will end up working under these sorts of criteria. This is Julie's bicycle. Have we heard of Julie's bicycle? No? Good. I go out and find these things, so you don't have to. Julie's bicycle has been around for 10 years. They work with the wider creative industries, everything from live sound, theatre, through to art, those sorts of things. And yeah, it's been promoting change in the creative industries, essentially. Again, they produce guidance, they carry out research. You might refer to them as a think tank, I would guess, in terms of the way they go about things. And this is their latest creative climate census, where they've interviewed 500 or so UK cultural leaders on climate change and environmental sustainability, and produced a whole heap of data in terms of what are people doing, why are they doing it, what are the challenges, what do they want in order to achieve greater sustainability. So in there we've got music and theatre, which fits quite well with the group, even the people who didn't have been paid to get here. I told you there'd be a little bit for you up there. So this is what kind of key statements that these creative leaders have kind of landed on. They all think that environmental sustainability is relevant to their organisation and mission. You know, well up in the 90% for all of that. Everybody thinks it's important, but there's all these challenges in terms of how they actually achieve that. And in practical terms, they're not generating their own power. They're not on a green tariff. Very few of them have a green champion. So it's this idea that yes, we think it's brilliant, it's important to our business, but really when we drill down to actually doing something, it kind of drifts away. And that's really, really common in terms of most organisations, really. They're getting the will and the momentum to get people on board and affect a proper change. And there's lots of really interesting quotes about what's driving the change. Up at the top right there, top reported drivers, commitment of staff or senior management. They're trying to reduce costs, and there's a certain amount of complying with regulations or funding bodies. So certain funding bodies like the Arts Council will expect sustainability to be part of what you're doing. Therefore, any Arts Council applications you write must have that in it. So, interestingly enough, you keep seeing money mentioned. There's a moral obligation, but also practical considerations such as financial benefits and funding conditions. Top left, there are two strands, a genuine concern for a global environment and cash. For a lot of businesses, it comes down to money. And if it's often the best way to get to a business is to get across to them how this is going to make them money. If you can get a business to look good, to promote what they're doing in new interesting places, then you start to pull the little strings of making money. And actually that's kind of the way business works a lot of the time. You can't always appeal to the moral conscience or the corporate responsibility, you appeal to the wallet. And a lot of these little quotes really kind of bear that out, and I find it's really interesting. So little comments about we're just doing what we can, not doing anything particularly innovative, just incrementally improving our practice, sharing knowledge, encouraging others. Nice stuff, but yeah, it's quite interesting that cash is being mentioned. This is what our creative leaders would like in order to go forward. They would like the right partners, they'd like to access external funding, they would like additional skills and knowledge. A lot of companies don't feel like they have the ability within their own team in order to do anything about this. So, you know, young people coming out of university with an amazing awareness of this area can come in and affect some change and bring something different. It's a really useful thing to be able to have to on your CV and your skills list, and they're actually looking for people to make a change, because often the skills aren't actually there. And I'm going to spin through that one because we've all had enough data so far. That's Julie's Bicycles video, which you can get on their website. It's about 7 minutes, so I'm not going to bother because I've got lots of time, stuff to get through. So yeah, Julie's Bicycle, think tank, creative industries, policy, drivers, research, and their website's full of useful advice and guidance. They're also working with the Arts Council now. So the Arts Council are producing a bi-yearly sustainability report on their activities throughout the whole of the Arts Council. They have senior directors who are exclusively looking at environmental sustainability, and Julie's Bicycle are helping them to write these reports and get that data. And also got a group called SIPA, who are Sustainability in Production Alliance. This is live sound and theatre and events. So there's a whole group of people who are looking at the live production industry. It's kind of off the back of Plaza, which is a pro light and sound organisation who run regular conferences and conventions. There's one in Leeds, one in Glasgow, I think, every year. So this is a kind of live sound end of things. And in the engineering world, traditional engineering, I'm thinking chemical engineering, civil engineering, building infrastructure, all that sort of stuff, is way ahead of anybody else on this front. Possibly because the civil engineering kind of industry have the potential to do incredible harm to our environment just through their activities, because they're such huge scale projects, and they recognise very early that they need to do things properly. So this guidance on sustainability for the engineering profession, it's kind of more aimed at civil engineering, but it's really important, useful for audio people, anybody who's engaged in projects and making and delivering stuff. And they got 6 key issues: contributing to build a sustainable society, present and future, applying professional and responsible judgment and take leadership roles, do more than just comply with legislation and codes, use resources effectively and efficiently, seek multiple views, and manage risk to minimise adverse impact on people and environment. You can see by the date down there, it was originally published in 1993. So a long way ahead of most other organisations. And engineering in the UK has kind of led the way globally in terms of doing this sort of stuff. So, we land ourselves on the audio world. There are 29 sustaining members supporting the UK section. How many of them do you think have a sustainability section on their websites?
None.
5.
5.
Yeah, 5.
Bingo. We've got 5 at the top. 5. Not very good, is it?
Well, I thought it was none, so 5 sounds good.
Yeah, well, when you see who the 5 are, that might
Okay.
might change things a little bit. So yeah, we have 29 sustaining members who are based in the UK and kind of broadly aligned with the UK section. Yeah, and only 5 have anything visible on sustainability or corporate responsibility on their websites. They may have a sustainability policy, but it's not published anywhere. And to my mind, you should be out and proud about these things. Get it out there. This is what we do. This is how we do it. So the ones that have, mostly the multinationals. So Yamaha, obviously a huge company, have a fantastic sustainability and corporate responsibility section. Obviously they're a huge company. Just so happens that they have quite a big UK operation who support the UK section. BBC, already mentioned the BBC. Again, huge organisation, very obviously British based, but huge organisation. Qualcomm, their corporate responsibility pages are unbelievably good. If you want to know what corporate responsibility looks like, go and look at their website. It's absolutely fantastic. Covers all areas, human rights through to workplace environment. It's absolutely fantastic. This is just a tiny snippet. I could spend a whole half hour going through Qualcomm's corporate responsibility stuff. It's really good. They are a massive company, and you would expect them to have good corporate responsibility. But yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. The other one is Cirrus Logic, who make amplifiers and small audio chips that kind of go in other devices. Again, they're a kind of multinational as well. They started off as a British company making amplifiers, and then it kind of got subsumed into a Chinese company. But again, theirs is really good, covering all this sort of stuff. They're only a small company, but they're already talking about all this sustainability stuff, supply chain ethics, responsible sourcing, going green to work, global workplace ethics, diversity, STEM, contributing to the community. Just fantastic. Everything you'd want to see in a list of corporate responsibility. And they're not a big company by any means, but they are kind of multinational. So the only one that isn't a big company, I'm kind of naming and shaming by exclusion, aren't I? So the rest of them you can assume are pretty rubbish. But the only purely kind of little British company is good old SSL down in Oxfordshire, who obviously make big mixing consoles. And they do have a section. It's not very comprehensive. That's about the sum total of it. But at least it's mentioned. At least there's consideration of it. And I know I've dealt with them. They are a good company and they do take these things seriously. But it's not really projected particularly well. So it's all a bit disappointing, really, in the audio world. We seem to be a long way behind broadcast, certainly. Broadcast have got it sorted and are doing some great things. Audio specific, not so much. And there's all sorts of really good stuff happening in the wider creative industries, but it seems that the audio people aren't really talking about that sort of thing. So partly that's going to be part of my mission for the next year, to raise some of those issues and see if we can do something about that. So last thing we're going to go through is education, and what can we do to raise awareness. might be mainly aimed at Mariana because you're the only educator in here.
So what am I not doing?
Everybody else is
So
being
is this-
educated.
What crap am I being?
You might find some of these exercises popping up in Mariana's classes. I've been trying to integrate sustainability into my teaching for 3 or 4 years now. Some of it's worked great, some of it hasn't. I'll kind of go through a few of the examples. As a general rule, it's not integrated very well across most areas. I don't know any of my colleagues that are doing this. There are lots of challenges to it, kind of identified by these researchers here: overcrowded curriculum, perceived irrelevance, limited staff awareness and expertise, limited institutional drive, again, lack of understanding, resistance to change, lack of staff commitment, seen as not their job. Quite often, as educators, we get very caught up in teaching the core curriculum. You know, we want to teach you about music and film and audio and TV, and we forget to teach you about the wider stuff, the other stuff that makes you a more rounded human being. There's lots of pressure to get you through assignments about audio related stuff, and that's what we end up being kind of focused on. And I think it's to the detriment of your education sometimes. So although many universities offer courses that address topics of sustainability within the existing curriculum, the connection to sustainability is neither always directly stated in course descriptions or syllabi, nor is the connection to sustainability made as strongly as possible. We're not making those connections. We're not telling you that we understand sustainability. We're not teaching it well enough, and you folks aren't aware that it's there, that it's an issue. And this is a paper about problem-based learning and teaching sustainability through that. An engineering curriculum for sustainability must embed education for sustainable development, learning principles, and create opportunities for students to learn and practice critical, holistic, and systemic thinking, applying it to real-life situations and enhance lifelong learning, responsible decision-making, and professional practice. Doesn't that sound like a great thing to aim for? I think we can all get behind that. Just out of interest, has anybody encountered sustainability as part of their education?
Only not very in depth.
Not very in depth.
No.
Fine. Anybody else? Then we'd do it at school, just out of interest. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I was kind of asking my students. A few of them said, yeah, we kind of talked about it, but we don't know much about it. My students were very aware, actually, once I start talking about these things. I'm sure you lot are very aware as well. Obviously, it's out there in the papers, lots of people talking about it. It's on the news, on the radio, all the time. So you're aware that it's kind of out there. But it's not often specifically in curriculum. We don't often talk about it. And we don't often apply it to audio as well. So, luckily for us, there's some great resources out there. UNESCO produced a whole multimedia teacher education program, which is a whole curriculum designed for delivering sustainability to everything from kind of A-level upwards, which is great. You lot probably aren't interested in that. I'll let Mariana get a picture of it.
There, ready done.
There's a group called Practical Action who promote environmental sustainability, and they've produced a whole heap of worksheets on their website, mostly aimed at school level, but I've used some of these principles at university level, and they're great fun. They're really interesting, well-designed things. And I've tried to take some of those examples and get some kind of specifically audio-related and awareness-related tasks and sessions. So one of the ones I do with my first years, probably haven't got time to do it with you lot, but is to just try and raise people's awareness, get people thinking about the space that they're in. How is it using energy? Where are the most energy inefficient devices. How might we reduce that? How are we staying warm in here? It's always really bloody warm in here. Why? What's going on? Somebody somewhere is boiling some water and sending down some pipes, which is kind of back to where we were about 40 minutes ago. How is that done? A lot of my students had no idea. We started talking about central heating and they're like, I don't really know how it works. So we had a quite nice chat about how central heating works and all that sort of thing. So just raising awareness, getting people thinking about the energy efficiency of a space and how it works. I also do a session about what have you done today? What's your carbon footprint today? What do you understand by carbon footprint? Anybody?
Is it kind of like what you do in your day-to-day activities and your kind of carbon output from that in terms of like transport you take, food you eat, clothes you wear, stuff you buy? Yeah,
absolutely. Everything you do requires some carbon, well, some energy input which produces carbon emissions, and it's basically trying to work that all out. Yeah, everything from driving to work to the clothes you're wearing. You know, you're wearing these, they were manufactured, that took some energy, that chucked up some carbon dioxide into the environment. And somewhere over in Bangladesh or China or wherever our clothes are made. So yeah, just thinking about those sorts of things. What is your carbon footprint? What have you done today? Are you recycling your waste? That always raises a laugh amongst my students. Trying to divert them from the obvious, but you know, rating your personal impact. Just thinking about yourself, your environment. Really easy things to do, but even my students, first year audio engineering students, we always end up doing half an hour to 40 minutes on these, and they always raise really interesting conversations. They're really aware, but it's just good to kind of just poke people a little bit and say, hey, think about what you're doing. This is a good one for you lot to do. Is go and find some standards documents, some guidance that applies to your industry. Go and find your university sustainability policy. My university claims to be sustainable. It's got a sustainability policy, but my students had great fun ripping it to pieces in a session that we did a few weeks ago. It's not very good. It's there. They talk about it, but it's not very good. So starting to critique these things and be aware of them. Go and grab the Albert certification and be aware of that. If you're a member of the IOA, IET, go and grab that. Unfortunately, you can't find the AES environmental sustainability document because it doesn't exist yet. Maybe I'll write one. That might be my mission for the next few months. So yeah, just think about a document, do some work on it. We do a session in the studio. That's a good one for this space as well. Look at all this acoustic treatment on the walls. Where's that come from? How's it made? Is it sustainable? What will happen to it when it goes? Think about the materials that our spaces are made from. Are there alternatives to that? There's lots of people looking at using stuff called eco wool for acoustic treatment. There's people looking at using recycled clothing for recording studio acoustic treatment, recycled jeans and things like that. And that's the same sort of thing. And I get my students to do some larger projects. So at second year, I set them the task of designing, or they can choose either a recording studio or a concert hall using purely sustainable materials. It has to be green, sustainable, and I make the statement that it needs to be a university flagship for sustainability, and then they have to meet that, and they really enjoy that. Yeah, one student came up to me the other day and said, "Oh, it's got to be renewable. That's a really good idea." I was like, it's almost as if I'd thought about it. Yeah, they get really into that, and there's one that goes alongside that where they can design a sound system for a small festival that has to run completely off the grid. So they have to spec up all the speakers, the amplifiers, the front of house, the stage monitors and all the equipment, work out how much energy that uses, and then design a renewable energy system to supply that, combining solar panels, wind turbines. We had an amazing pedal power one where somebody worked out exactly how many people had to be pedaling for a certain amount of time to keep it running. We had somebody do a complete weather map of the whole of the UK and work out the average sunshine hours in each county in order to work out the best place to hold his festival. And it was just great. It's really interesting. It actually took the people who were initially interested in live sound, and they really started thinking about the way they do things. And it's a really challenging thing. They think, oh, that sounds fun. It's live sound. I can do that. And then once they get into it, they're like, oh, this is really messing with my head, because they've got to calculate all the energy use and worst case scenario, best case scenario, how many batteries they need to store the energy when the sun goes down. And, somebody started investigating electricity generating floors with piezo crystals in them and all sorts. Really good fun. This is my kind of second year project, so they get to choose one of those. There's a few others that run alongside them which don't have the green environmental thing in it, but they're really good things. And then final year stuff and masters, obviously big projects, final year projects. I get my students to think about the environmental impact of what they're doing as part of the ethical process. I'm guessing you've all done ethics applications if you're doing masters and final year stuff. Build that in, make it part of it. I think that should be part of your ethics process. Right, closing thoughts. Getting up to about an hour. Remarkably managed to whiz through nearly 90 slides in 53 minutes. I've been talking quite quickly, and most of them were pictures. I'm trying to avoid text at the moment. I'm trying to have more pictures. So easy wins for people. Talk about it. Spread the word. Don't be afraid of it. There's a whole people of my generation and above who are ignoring this. It's the responsibility of your generation to make things happen, to do something. I think there's far too much of my generation and above sitting around enjoying their retirement money and going, this isn't my problem. And it really is a problem for everybody. The government have been completely inactive on climate change recently, and you need to talk about it. Stand up. Make it your issue. Simple things you can do: travel less and consume less. We talked about that earlier. Travel's a massive thing, and anything you consume travels as well. Anything you buy off Amazon or off the internet that arrives at your house magically, that has a huge carbon footprint. Until we get the armies of drones delivering it all, travel is a massive issue, and consumption is a massive issue. Recycle your materials. Think about what you use materials-wise. Sign up for a green energy plan for your home. Who's on green energy at home? You all should be. Great. The small green energy companies are cheaper on their green energy things than the big companies. So take Bulb, who are currently the cheapest. Their 100% green electricity tariff is cheaper than E.ON, Empower, British Gas, all the big suppliers. Go on, compare the market or Money Supermarket. They're not more expensive these days, and there's loads of really cool little companies like Good Energy, Bulb, Ovo, who are doing stuff cheaper than the big boys. And there's also Robin Hood Energy and White Rose Energy, who are not-for-profit energy companies. So White Rose Energy is based in Leeds, supplies Yorkshire, supplies green energy, and it's not-for-profit, and it's cheap. So you get 100% green energy, cheaper than anybody else. So easy win. Turn things off when you're not using them. Encourage your organisation to engage. And call out poor practice. Be prepared to say when things aren't particularly environmentally friendly or green. Don't be afraid of doing that. As educators, we need to embed that in our practice, embed it in our assignments. I was initially a bit nervous about how it would work with my students, and they might feel it was a little bit forced on them, but they've totally embraced it. Been like, this is a great idea. I'm just enjoying the challenge of thinking differently, of taking what they normally do in terms of audio, but just approaching it from a different angle. And I've been really pleased with the way they've engaged in that, and that's actually empowered them. They're really kind of confident because they're doing something different. are doing something that their peers and that other people from other universities, their mates, have gone off and done stuff they're not doing, and they kind of really enjoy that. There's loads of guidance out there, Ariana.
No pressure.
Loads of off-the-shelf sessions that you can run. It's not particularly. It shouldn't be onerous to do that sort of thing, but it's our responsibility to make sure that you are aware of those things if you're not already aware, because that makes you better people, makes you more employable, and it makes you more likely to go and change the world, which are all good things. 3 rhetorical questions, to which the answer to all of them is probably yes, although my wife might argue about the last one, as I'm swearing and banging things and breaking stuff. But yeah, I think the AES needs a sustainability policy. We don't have one. The IOA has one, the IET has one, the Engineering Council has one. Most of the big kind of trade bodies do. We don't. And our sustaining members aren't doing very well either. So we need a few nudges in that direction. And at some point I will get my power station working. Although probably not by steam power. So to finish off, engineering isn't easy. I broke a few things. I tried to make my flywheel a bit lighter by drilling some weight out of it, and it snapped in half. And then I tried to screw it together again, and it snapped in half again. So that didn't work very well. I'm basically telling you all of my engineering mistakes. My water wheel fell apart because it was just held together with glue guns. I dropped it on the floor and it spectacularly exploded. Blow torches are kind of dangerous. You might catch the look on my face with this one. That made me jump.
I don't want you doing my DIY, I have to say.
The thing is, I consider myself to be a really competent DIY. I do all my own. I've done all my own plumbing and my own electrics, fitted a kitchen and 2 bathrooms. I was a bit annoyed to fail quite spectacularly. Dogs don't help. I tried to go wind power, and even Blakey blowing on it, he wasn't impressed. He was like, "What are you doing? Come on, feed me. I'm going to sniff this." So yeah, he wasn't much help either. So I tried to make a wind power thing over there. Obviously, it wasn't a very windy day. But if we turn the volume down, I kind of resorted to slightly unfair methods just to prove a point. If you listen carefully,
Let's spin all the Denelects and just put that.
I think it would have to be an incredibly windy day for me to get any noise out of it. But eventually, the sun came out. My £3 solar panel from Rapid Electronics powered the whole thing with no faff, no engineering required. So the moral of the story is that solar panels, solar power is the answer. And that all this setting fire to stuff and creating steam and just doesn't work very well unless you've got loads of money and a far more talented engineer than me. So yeah, just kind of sobering thought. David Attenborough at the National Climate Conference a couple of months ago. We've overrun our planet in a way that's unprecedented. No other creature in the world has had the effect on the planet that the human species has. And so we ought to be aware of what we've done and recognise the responsibility that we now have in our hands. At a personal level, do as much as you can, as much as you're able, as long as you're thinking about doing what you can. There does need to be big structural change at government and corporate level, which is to some extent out of our hands. Fortunately, there's plenty of people shouting about it, but you know, I certainly wouldn't berate anybody for using the odd paper cup, because I do every now and then.
Okay.
Great.
Thank
Thanks,
you very
folks.
much. Thank you.